Ladies and gentlemen, today our guest of honor is Miranda Young. She is a paranormal investigator. Rather, I should say, she is an solo paranormal investigator who rides on the Harley Davidson bike and investigates a lot of interesting cases. Let's hear from Miranda. Here, we will interview people from different parts of the world and they will share their journey, their failures, their success, their hardships, and ultimately their success stories. Always remember that all dreams can come true provided you have the courage to pursue them. Hey guys, I'm Showman, father of two dogs, one bird, a backbencher, married to a school teacher, a photographer turned market analyst, and I'm also a podcaster who will help you to launch your podcast and your audience will go crazy about. I'm the host and producer of this podcast channel, Chase Your Dream. Welcome to my channel. Before we begin, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also the bell icon so that you never miss a show. So this is the perfect time for the interview. It is 12 o'clock midnight in my place and this is the perfect time, I would say. And thank you, Miranda, for changing the time. I'm feeling really excited to share the mic with you at this point of time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So for the viewers and the listeners who doesn't know Miranda, she is a paranormal investigator. And she will take us through a lot of things there, how she chased her dream, and a lot of stories we are going to share. So tell us, how did it all got started?
Well, first of all, thank you, Shuman, for having me on your show tonight. I've been very excited to speak with you and your listeners. I've been a paranormal investigator for about 12 years now, and I've always had an interest in the paranormal as well as storytelling and local folklore and legends here in the States and also worldwide. I've always had an interest for it. My grandmother, she would always share stories with me about growing up in the Appalachian Mountains and some of the folklore that she experienced, as well as haunts and haunted stories. And then my dad also, he really instilled the importance of storytelling and sharing these stories that everyone around us has heard throughout the generations. And so I was always interested in that as well as the supernatural. And about 12 years ago, I was approached by a guy who owned a team, and he saw that I had a background in photography. And so he wanted me to look at some different pictures and try to debunk or come up with a logical explanation as to why they were capturing some of these different photographs on their investigations. So I went and I started looking at these images, and in order to pay me back from looking at the images, he invited me to go on my very first paranormal investigation, which was at a local restaurant and bar. And it was said to be rumored to be haunted by a couple of the spirits a couple of the people who were locals there that would come about every week, and have drinks at the bar, and also a security guard who had passed away while doing his rounds. So I did that investigation and was invited back. We had a lot of great activity that night. I was even actually touched for the first time, which was unnerving and unsettling for the first time, because you see it all the time on TV. But to actually be there and experience it for myself was something quite unique, and I wasn't really sure what it would be like. And so they invited me on another investigation, which was of a local school, and again, had great success with it. And they then invited me to become a member of the team. And so on the team, I was their photo analysis. And I looked at the images and everything. And I would also go in before investigations, take photos and everything so that we could have something to reference and look back at. And then I also was their video and evidence producer. So I would take what we got during the investigations and put them out in videos to share with people, to kind of start a conversation as to whether, they had any explanation for what was out there, and then just kind of share our adventures. And so we would investigate some of the larger, more commercial locations that are around the country here, like Waverly Hills, Sloss Furnace, Old South Pittsburgh Hospital. We would investigate those, but then we would also investigate residential cases where people would call us up. Sometimes they were local businesses, sometimes they were people's homes. And so they would call us in to see if we could come up with some kind of logical explanation as to what they were experiencing. And so I did that for about 8 years. And we were a team of 5 people at the time. And so while I was out investigating with the team, whenever I was on my own, if I was traveling for work or if I was just kind of out on my own during the weekends, I found that I was out on my motorcycle going to some of these different locations on my own. And they were typically locations that you would do urbex or urban exploration, and also sharing those images on my social media pages and sharing the stories. And so those photos and stories that I was sharing on my page, they were starting to get a lot of attention. People were wondering, where are these places? Because I was visiting places like abandoned buildings, train tunnels, those sort of places. People were asking if they were haunted or if there was some kind of interesting story behind it. And so I got to thinking, why just put these images out there on social media when I can actually document it through video and document those travels? So I sat down and, like I said, my background is in photography and marketing, and I came up with Ghost Biker Explorations. And so I ended up leaving the team so that I could see and try to pursue this dream of combining my passion of motorcycle riding, travel, and history and the paranormal, and putting it into a web series that I was able to share with people who may not be able to go to some of these places, or may not want to do an investigation but want to experience it through video. So through that, Ghost Biker Explorations was born, and now we're rolling into the 4th season of the show.
So this should have been the first question actually, but I would like to ask you right now. This is for the viewers and for the listeners. So what does a paranormal investigator do?
Absolutely. So a paranormal investigator goes out and looks to see and tries to communicate with spirits or ghosts. They go out to different locations. They may be a person's home. They may be a business. We do not get paid for this. There are some people who are mediums or psychics. There are others that are also on the religious spiritual side who may be demonologists. So there are a bunch of different classifications of paranormal investigators. For myself, I like to go out and really dig into the historical side of it. A lot of the locations that I visit have an interesting history, like the Lizzie Borden house. That has the history and the story of how Lizzie supposedly killed her parents. So I research deep into the history, go to the location, and then ask questions and take different tools in to see if we can get response or communication from spirits that might be able to validate some of that history that we've been researching. I don't remove spirits or cross anyone over or anything like that. That I don't feel that that's my place. I just essentially go in. If a homeowner calls me, I will go in, see, they'll tell me what they're experiencing. I'll run different tests with different tools and try to get answers, try to figure out if there's a logical explanation, like maybe the wiring in the house or, using your phone before you go to bed, high EMF levels, those sort of things. I go in and try to find a logical explanation. If I can't, if I can pick up some type of different spiritual activity, then if the homeowner can't live in, coexist with what they're experiencing, then there are other people that I'll reach out to and turn that over to assist them in that case.
So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, with us today on the other side is also a biker who rides on the Harley Davidson bike, goes to places and investigates. So, I am really feeling my goosebumps straight away. So, I like to understand the process of investigation, like pre, post, and also the main process which you follow.
Sure, absolutely. So, as I said, I really like to dig into the historical side. So, sometimes people will reach out to me and they'll tell me that, here's a cool location. It may be like a bridge or a building or whatever that is well known in their hometown to be haunted or have some kind of cool local legend or story. So, people will reach out to me, or I'll read. I do a lot of reading of the books of local legends in the area. I'll find out the story, and then I'll go and I usually spend a month or two researching the location. I'll either travel there and try to talk to different people who have had different experiences, or I will go to the historical archives and try to find newspaper articles and anything that I can find that's tangible to kind of give me more information on this history. Then I will also get online, get on the internet, and see what I'm finding on there, see if there are other investigators who have investigated. But I do a really heavy research process. And then, because I'm a biker and because the travel is so important, I go in and I start researching the town that I'm going to be traveling to, because I always want to have, I want to be able to share my route that I travel to, and then I want to be able to give some interesting and cool facts about the location or the town that it's in, so that if anyone wants to travel there, they've got more information about what, just kind of some fun facts. And so then I'll make the trip. I always plan my investigation out, and I have to plan it out very well because I am traveling on the motorcycle. So I do have to travel lightly. I will take specific tools that I really like to take and really like to use. And then I will also look at different trigger items that may be germane to the history that's at this location. And so it will either be just myself, or it'll be myself and a videographer who will travel there. And so I'll travel to the location. If I can investigate it, depending on the size, a couple days, I like to do that. But at least, if it's an overnight, I'll spend, at least 12 to 14 hours inside the location. Once I'm inside the location, or if it's not a building, if it's, something outside, once I'm there, I just start doing different experiments and techniques based on the tools that I brought. I always make sure that I have a digital recorder as well as a video, either a videographer with me or other cameras to capture, because you just never know. And from what I've found, a lot of the time it starts from the minute you get there. It doesn't just start when you start investigating, but just when you get there. And sometimes when I'm taking a break, that's when I'll get some of the most stuff. If I'm in a building or a home that I'm investigating, I will, if I'm there for many hours, I will always try to take a couple hours and sleep if possible before I have to head back. I've found that if I have that recorder, have that camera on me, as well as several other tools, I found that sometimes I get some of my best evidence when I'm sleeping, because you put yourself in that vulnerable situation, and you're also you're in that more astral plane where you're more open. And it seems like at times, sometimes the spirits are more apt to communicate and want to interact with you at that point. And so once the investigation is over and wrapped up and I make my trip back home, that's when the post evidence review starts. And a lot of the time, because I am a solo investigator, I have to go through all of the evidence myself, and I really go through it with a fine-tooth comb because I want to make sure I try to account for light pollution, any type of noise pollution that's around. So I really scrutinize that evidence. If it's a large location like a jail or a prison or a hospital, being that I'm one person, I will drop off static cameras and static recorders with pre-recorded questions because sometimes I'm not able to spend a lot of time in every room or every spot. So when you have about 12 to 14 hours of investigating and 5 different cameras and 5 different audio recorders, that's a lot of evidence to go through, especially if you're there for many hours. So what I try to do is I try to set limits for myself. 2 weeks out, I want to have all of my audio recorders listened to. By 4 weeks out, I like to have all of my video watched, just so I can go in, because my episodes are they're soul produced, so I do everything pretty much myself. And if I'm fortunate enough to have a videographer with me, then that always helps. But once all the evidence has been gone through and I have some stuff that I consider unexplainable, then I will go through and I'll record my story, because I really like to be able to share that history and then put the evidence together. I like to keep the episodes between 20 and 40 minutes just because I don't want to overwhelm anyone that's going to sit down and watch. And during that time, I always cover the travel there, the story as to why I'm there, and a little bit about the town, and then the investigation. I often tell, if I don't get any type of activity, if it's a quiet night, that doesn't mean it's not haunted. It may just mean that for some reason they didn't want to communicate with me that night. But I always like to pick locations that have an interesting enough history that I can still share and then put out there that, for me, it was a relatively quiet night. I've just been very fortunate that the different places that I've gone to, we've got a lot of activity. So that's pretty much the process. And that's why I don't really release episodes throughout the year. That's why I decided to put them all together and release them during the month of October, every Tuesday night. Because for me, October is a spooky month. And so everyone is in the mood for Halloween and for ghost stories. But it also gives me time when I investigate throughout the year. It gives me time to really dig into that research and really dig into going through the evidence review.
So how are your equipments differ? Obviously, I'm guessing it's normal equipment which we use, or anything different that you use?
There are some pieces of equipment that are specific for paranormal investigation or for ghost hunting. And then, I often tell people that, if a spirit wants to communicate, it's going to use anything that it can to communicate with us. One of my favorite tools that I love to use, they're called dowsing rods or witching rods, which here in the United States, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, settlers would use these rods. They're copper rods that you hold in your hand, and they kind of float in a metal sheath, and so you can't control them. But when they would be looking for water and underground springs, they would use those rods to find that. And so that's a popular tool used in paranormal investigating. I like to use that because we do experience a lot of battery drain whenever we're in these locations. So if you're using recorders, REM pods, EDI boxes, those sort of things, the spirits can drain the batteries. The great thing about these rods is that they're simple, they don't use batteries, and also a lot of the spirits that we're communicating with, they understand what they are. So you're not asking them to touch a light or touch something that they don't understand. You can, typically what I do is I'll ask yes and no questions. I'll ask them to cross the rods for yes, leave them open for no. And then I'll also ask directional questions. Like if I'm sitting in a church and I'll ask the question, can you point the rods to the piano? And so I'll pick different items. And so it's easy for them to point. And it also, one of the questions I always ask, is, can you see me? And so it really kind of validates that once they start responding to that they can see me and see other items in the room. So I will use those rods again, which they're a common tool. I also use audio recorders and video recorders, which those are my favorite for documenting. And then there is a tool called an EDI Plus box. And it's a small box, about just a little bit larger than a cell phone, and it registers temperature in the moment, so you can actually see the temperature change. It's got some lights on it that will light up if there is a temperature fluctuation, if there's a change in pressure, or if there is any type of atmospheric change. And it will actually record these changes and document them on a graph. It has an EMF detector in it that will detect fluctuations in the EMF field. And then it's also got a geophone in it, which will detect vibration. And you have to actually, it has to be physically touched for this to light up. So I actually love to keep this box with me regardless of what tools I'm using, because if you have a flashlight going off, if you capture a voice, if you're also able to capture any type of atmospheric change, then those tools working together kind of helps to show that it's not just one tool showing. You may actually have something supernatural happening because you've got multiple tools picking up multiple changes at the same time. So I really like to use that. But then we also use things like, we will use flashlights. The theory behind that is that the spirits can use their energy to manipulate and turn the flashlights on. We've had good success with that. A spirit box, which is a modified AM/FM radio. The theory behind that is that spirits can use white noise to aid in communication. And sometimes you'll hear phrases. What happens is the AM/FM radio will scan very quickly across the frequencies, and you set your scan rate. And so when you start getting some of these voices, sometimes you do get radio interference, and other times with it scanning so quickly, you're not really going to get complete phrases as it's skipping so quickly. Plus, you can pull this data onto your computer and actually look at the sound waves and see if it's falling within the scan or if it's going over broadband. So that's just a few of the tools. I've got some proximity meters that I'll set up that will detect if there is a change in temperature or a change in an anomaly moving into a proximity, almost like a motion detector. We also have an SLS camera, which will cast out so essentially it casts out a grid. And in this grid, if there is something that is believed to potentially be a spirit, it will map it on your screen as a stick figure. And we've actually been able to capture, now you will get false positives sometimes, so you have to make sure that you keep your camera steady. And if you're looking at a doorway or something, it can map the doorway. So the important thing is to know your equipment and know that sometimes these can cast out false positives. But what's really cool is if you have your EDI box sitting up, and I've actually captured stick figures on the SLS camera, go over to the EDI box and ask them to touch the box. And we've captured the spirit touching the box and the temperature actually changing. So that's 3 different times that we've captured something, which would lead me to believe that we did encounter some activity at that moment. That's just a few of the tools. And like I said, people will use, they'll use cat balls, which are like cat toys, different trigger items, depending on the location. Often we'll take, if we're in a jail, we'll take cigarettes or whiskey, different things that they may have enjoyed in life, just to see if we can trigger a response. So it really varies. There are specific tools for that, but then there are a lot of tools that, are everyday items that a spirit can use to manipulate, to communicate.
Do you also carry holy water?
I do have some. I do have some that I will carry with me. I am a very I'm a very religious person. And so for myself, sometimes we think we know what we're communicating with, but there are situations where sometimes you may run across a more darker non-human entity. That does happen. It's rare, but it does happen. So I always do, before I go out, I always do the prayer of protection before I leave. And then I do a prayer of protection before I actually leave the location. And a lot of the time when I'm inside there, I'm also kind of, praying. And I always make sure, if I am in a location that has an entity that's rumored to be a darker entity, one, I don't investigate that by myself. And two, there's certain experiments that I will not do to open myself up if that is the case. But for the most part, we're just really looking for myself, I'm looking for historical validation and sharing that story that maybe the spirit is wanting to share.
So, identifying a place, then going over there, then taking it, and then ultimately publishing it. So, how is long is the process?
The process is typically a couple months long. I usually look at about 3 months when I'm doing an investigation, because just that pre-research, sometimes it can be a little bit quicker if it's a location. One, for instance, that I did was the Jellicoe troop train accident of 1944. This was where it was one of the worst troop train accidents that occurred, and the train derailed into an area of the river known as the Jellicoe Narrows. And so there wasn't really a whole lot of investigating that I could do. There was a lot of researching with the history, but I actually had to park my bike up on this mountain road and hike down the side of the mountain to this area on the river. And so I didn't think that we would really get a lot of EVP voices, which are electronic voice phenomenon, which are just voices that you pull out of the air. I didn't think that we would really get that because we had the road noise. So essentially this spot was kind of down in a ravine. You had the road noise from the mountain, you had the water noise, and then you also had the noise from the railroad. So we had to really account for the noise contamination. That particular investigation was a lot shorter because I made 2 trips there, and it was about a 2-hour ride from where I currently live. And I think I probably spent about 3 hours investigating each time. So really, I didn't have to go back and review a lot of video. I just had to review from that moment where I was there because I didn't put up any static cameras. So some investigations can take a shorter amount of time, but a typical investigation of a home, a business, or a location where I'm actually spending the night at, typically, I usually like to give myself about 3 months to go through everything and to get that episode put together.
So, I would like to understand, when you are on an investigation mode, your mental frame is completely different. So, how do you identify what is illusion and what is real?
And that can be a challenge. That's a great question. And that's one of the things where my motorcycle comes in handy, because you really do have to be in a very grounded, a very solid frame of mind when you do this, because it is really easy to get into the moment, and we can put ourselves in some pretty creepy, scary situations. And so the body and the mind reacts completely different whenever you're in the heat of the moment of an investigation and something's happening. So the motorcycle really helps me to get my mind right, get grounded, get centered, and really get in that investigation frame of mind. When I go in, I don't like to be anxious. I don't like to be upset. I really like to be as calm and focused when I go in, because I feel like at times that can actually really affect the way that the activity responds to me. And so it can be a challenge sometimes. And that's why I think being able to, one, account for the outside, if say you're in a building, you can account for the outside noise pollution, if there's dogs barking, if there's people around, and things in the moment, they look and sound different, when you're in an investigation. And then whenever you go back and you're listening to your audio and watching your video, you may be like, well, I hear a sound. Was there somebody outside? So I try to take those steps beforehand to really kind of help to tell, could this be something unexplainable, or could this be something that's reality? And so when I sleep at the different locations, I've had things happen where I had a picture get ripped off the wall in a funeral home that I slept at. And I went into such a deep sleep that after when it crashed to the floor, I was really kind of surprised, but I've really kind of trained myself over the last, decade of doing this. When something happens, when we capture a voice, when there's a loud noise, don't jump up, don't, try to rush into it, try to kind of lay there or sit there and be calm about it, because, a lot of the time we might capture something on the camera. A perfect example of this was I was staying at the Grand Old Lady Hotel in North Carolina, and I was just about to go to sleep, and this was a collaboration investigation. I was in one room, there were two other ladies in another room, and we were trying to go to sleep. And just as I was getting ready to go to sleep, we hear this male voice that says, "Please don't go," just as clear as could be. And there were no males on the property. And so I laid there, and we kind of laugh about it, because my friends were like, "You just laid there, you didn't jump up or anything." And I said, well, you might see something. And if I jump up in the moment, I may stir up some dust or something that would cause an orb that could be a false positive. So just trying to really have that control over my mind and body when I'm in a kind of heightened type of situation has really kind of helped to cut back on some of that, as far as to determine if it could possibly be reality of just life going on in its normal day, or something supernatural or unexplained happening.
You must have scheduled your visits to each and every places after you investigate, or in pre-investigate state. So does it ever happen that, say, suppose you scheduled something for after 10 days or 15 days, but any magnetic attraction that you want to go there, any such phenomena which has happened to you?
I have. There have been several locations like that. I'm always interested. One in particular was Revenant Acres in Indiana. And this location had stories of, it kind of had some dark stories. The entity that was believed to be in this location was known as Seven. I don't know the history behind Seven, but I know that it's a phenomenon that paranormal investigators and ghost hunters have captured at several different locations. They've actually captured the name. And Seven was said to be at this location. He was said to be a dark entity that did not like women and was very aggressive toward women. I watched a couple different videos. It was also a location that was documented to have two different documented spiritual possessions there of two males. And so my friend and I took another female friend with me, and I was really drawn to this location, and it was really more so because there was no history as to why this location was experiencing this dark activity. And so, I was really intrigued by that, and I really started looking into the history of the land and of that town to see if there was anything that could contribute to why there was so much dark activity at this location. And we went, and we had so much activity, and it really was dark activity. We were able to document that. I believe it's episode 3 in season 2, and the location has since, nobody goes there now, because the owners of it passed away, and they passed it down to their children, and the children, they decided they divided up the land, and so they closed it down for people to go and investigate. But and I think they were actually going to tear the house down. But what's interesting about that to me is the activity we got did corroborate with what a lot of other people had gotten. And for some reason, I just felt this magnetic draw to this place, this curiosity. I guess because there wasn't some big grand story about it. And there have been a couple places like that that I've read the story about, and I'm like, man, I've just got to go check this out, because it's just, and see it for myself and experience it for myself. So it does, for me, it happens quite often. Just and those are the ones I find I'm more passionate about in the investigation, because there is that pull and that draw to it.
So, any favorite place, literally insane, which you have uncovered?
One of my, there's quite a few that we've gone to. One of my favorites has been Brushy Mountain State Prison, and I've investigated that one on 6 different occasions. It's known as the End of the Line, and it's in Petros, Tennessee. And this location, it housed the worst of the worst prisoners, and I got such a variety of activity at that location that I just had to keep going back. And so on one of the specific times, I was actually there on the property investigating solo, and I ended up sleeping in the solitary confinement unit, which they call the hole. And this area is literally several rooms located down in a hole. And they put the prisoners who were misbehaving, and they would keep them in there. I mean, these rooms, they were solid dark when they locked you in there. So your senses are just, you can't, they would say when they would come out, they couldn't walk and they couldn't see very well because it was so dark. And they had essentially 2 buckets, one to use the bathroom in and one with their food in it. And I mean, it was literally dark. And so on this one particular occasion, I think it was the 4th time I investigated there, I actually slept down in that area, and I got some of the best audio, some of the best Class A EVP evidence that I've ever captured. And, we classify it into 2 different categories. If you get Class A EVPs, you either get intelligent or residual. And intelligent is just like it sounds. It's responding to you, either what you're saying or what you're doing. It knows what's going on. Residual is something, it's almost like replaying a tape. So if you're in an area, for instance, this prison, the laundry area was up above the hole. And so I was sleeping really early in the morning. There was no power in here either. And I captured what sounded like the laundry door on the dryer being opened and closed and it running, but there was no power for it to run. That's residual. It's just something that would happen every day. It's like a sound or an action that gets caught in a loop and replays for whatever reason. So within this 3.5 hours that I slept down in the solitary confinement unit, I had captured 3 minutes and 15 seconds of intelligent and residual. In the beginning, you hear these amazing footsteps, and I had cameras sitting outside my door and inside my door, so you could see there was nobody coming in. We get footsteps come up to the door, and this gravelly, creepy voice, it sounds like it's standing at the jail cell. It says, "Night, night." And I did not hear it at the moment because I was asleep. And so we hear that. And then after about 30 minutes, there's this creepy male voice that says, "Help me." And then a whisper that says, "Help me," right after it. And then communication that sounds like, between these cells, it's solid rock. And it's a couple layers of rock, and you can hear conversation going on between cells, like maybe they're either talking through an air vent or just talking through the walls. And you can triangulate based on where my recorder is, that one voice is clearly coming from another cell, and you can kind of tell where they're coming from. And so That's the intelligence that's happening. And then you hear the laundry going on, which at this time, it was early in the morning, probably, I think it was around 8 in the morning, but it was dark in there since I was underground. But that would be the time that they would start doing their laundry. So you hear the laundry going upstairs, and there's no power in the entire complex. And then the only other thing that I can make this out to be, you hear what sounds like somebody taking and just bouncing a ball against the wall. You hear like it hits the floor, hits the wall, comes back. So you hear a succession of bouncing, and this goes on for 5 minutes. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I was talking to a former prison guard, and he said, it makes perfect sense. He said, that does sound like almost like a little rubber ball, kind of like either a cricket ball or a racket ball. And he said back at that time in the 80s, they used to give the prisoners these little rubber balls. They couldn't make contraband out of it, or they couldn't make a weapon, and they would just give it to them to use. And he said, so that's probably actually what that is. And it was really cool to be able to match that sound up, and then also be able to match the history. So that's probably one of the most interesting places that I've been visited, as well as one of my absolute favorites is the Grand Old Lady in North Carolina. And it was a hotel. If you've ever seen the movie Stephen King's The Shining, it was the exact same way, except here in the South. And this hotel was built in the early 1900s. It had 58 rooms in it. And these rooms, they did not have TVs. They kept them very rustic. And that's one of the things we look for when we're on investigations, if there's power, if there's TVs, if there's anything that can interfere with our equipment. So they had the rooms very rustic. And what's interesting about it is because it's in the mountains of North Carolina, during the wintertime, because the winters get so harsh, they would actually close the hotel down for 4 or 5 months, and then they would open it during the summer. So I was able to go and spend the night at the hotel while they were closed down and while there was nobody else on the property. And so got a ton of activity. I highlighted that in season 3, episode 1. And there was a homicide that took place there. There was a lot of the activity was kind of light and happy activity. It would remind you of people who would take the railroad trains to the hotel and stay during the summer as a getaway. So it wasn't really anything dark, but very interactive. It really wanted to interact with me. And then you could really see the psychological aspect of how being there in a closed down location up in the mountains, just how it's more of a psychological type haunting rather than a physical one.
So, how is going for a ghost hunting expeditions? How is it different from a normal sightseeing visit?
Well, they can be one and of the same. Different people have, different reasons that they've got started. My best friend, she got started doing it as a girls' trip. Myself, I started more local and actually started investigating and then started taking the trips. As for myself, I try to combine the two. If I can go on a sightseeing trip where I can throw in a night at a haunted location, I'll do that. A lot of the time, the difference between would be that a normal sightseeing trip, people may do like a ghost walk tour where a guide takes them and tells them stories, and then they get to be in the location but hear the story, but they don't actually get to spend the night and take tools in and ask questions. An actual investigation, you're pretty, and it can be as large as or as small as you want, but a lot of the time, if you take the trip for the investigation, you're going in and you're spending more time kind of really diving in and doing the investigation rather than just hearing the stories.
So, I have a question. It's for me only, for my knowledge. Can ghosts travel?
Yeah, from my experience, yes. There's a lot of different theories as to why this can be. You know, I tend to believe that a lot of what we're dealing with is energy, and so negative or positive energy. But then I also tend to think, of course, my theories change the more I do this. But the other theory that I have is that we're not really separated that far from the spirits in the afterlife. You know, for myself, from the Christian point of view, you know, we believe that when you die, your soul, you know, goes away, goes to heaven or hell, whatever. But I believe they're actually maybe a little bit closer than what we think. That the veil is thinner, and that you know, the afterlife is closer. And so one of the examples of this is a location that I'm going to be highlighting in season 4, the Ma Barker house in Florida. And what's interesting about this location is that the house was the site of the longest FBI shootout that's ever been in America. And it was the Ma Barker, the Barker Carpus gang. And so inside this house, it's down in Florida, and it sat on a piece of land where the shootout actually took place. Well, the house was very well preserved. The people who owned it, they actually saved everything inside of it. So when you go in, the actual items that were in the house when the shootout occurred are still in there, and the bullet holes are still in the wall. Well, the family ended up selling the land, and the people who bought the land, they didn't want the house. And so the city wanted the house, and they actually put the house on a boat and floated it to a different piece of land. And so when I investigated this house, and I'm just one of 2 different groups that's actually been able to investigate this, the house is very active. And so there are times where it seems more tied to the land. There are times that it seems more tied to the house. And to me, this is a perfect example of how the spirits move, because I feel like they were tied to the house versus actually tied to the land.
So do you have any experience where you have gone for an investigation, it has been completed, you came back and you feel something is with you?
I have. There was one particular occasion I was investigating Hell's Bar Dam, which is a haunted dam in Tennessee. And I had investigated this location. It's haunted by several different things, but there's a heavy Native American presence with this dam. And so I had done this investigation, and it was actually ended up being a very personal investigation. It was the first time I'd actually had a spirit call my name, and was able to capture that on my recorder. And it just seemed, while I was there, I kept getting touched, and it was just a very personal, invading my space type investigation. And so I went home, and I started having some bizarre things happen in my house. I live alone, and I would come in and things would be moved. And so I had wondered if somebody was coming in. Now, I had a dog. It was a little small dachshund. And so she was real small, about 13 pounds. And I put up a recorder, because after about 4 or 5 days of things happening, I put up a recorder and was listening. And so you hear me leave, you hear me arm the alarm, and about 10 minutes and 13 seconds after I leave, you hear my dog start running upstairs. She's just running and panting. You can tell she's in distress. And I get this gravelly, I don't know, you could tell it was not a human voice. It said, "Sugar, stop." And what's interesting is my dog's name was Sugar. Yeah. And so I captured that on the recorder. So I was a little disturbed and a little intrigued by that. And so I put a couple more recorders out. I did that while I had gone to work. And so I put a little more recorders out. I ended up capturing a child, and this was in November. And so here in Tennessee, it gets really cold in November. And I had gone to my parents for the weekend. And when I captured this, it was at night and it was cold. So there were no kids outside that this could have picked up. Plus, the recorder was in my downstairs level, where the downstairs is underground like a basement. So it wouldn't have even been able to hear something outside. But I captured a child's voice that said, I'm going outside. Excuse me. And said, I'm going outside. Well, a few weeks after that, I was running kind of late coming home. And when I came home, my dog had pulled my motorcycle jacket off of the chair and used the bathroom on it. Excuse me.
Yeah.
She had, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. She had pulled my jacket off of the chair and used the bathroom on it. And that was unusual behavior for my dog. And so at this point, I had a camera system up in my house for security reasons. And so I went back, looked at the camera footage, and I caught what looked like an orb. It comes out of my jacket. It's like it comes out of nowhere, comes out of the jacket, and moves across the room. Well, my dog, she saw this, and so she goes over to the jacket, pulls the jacket off, and is using the bathroom on it. So I originally thought from her behavior, she was upset at me. But once I started really analyzing it, it was probably more of a defensive thing, that she was marking her territory. So I looked at the behavior. I'm not a big orb person, but combining that with the behavior was really compelling to me. So as far as what was there, I feel like it had followed me from Hell's Bar Dam. And really, once I acknowledged it, and it's like it moved on. But that's been the only time that I felt like I've had something actually follow me.
So, according to you, the horror movies and the TV shows, do they really depict the paranormal investigators correctly?
You know, that's a great question too, and that's what I tell a lot of people, is that the TV has done a really good job as far as, you know, getting the word out about what we do, but it's also sort of created a false perception, because a lot of the time people think you go into these locations, it's just going to be nonstop activity, and you know, these people, they put it into a 30-minute or an hour-long show, but the reality is we're there all night long. There's a lot of sitting around, asking questions, not hearing anything in the moment. The fact that we don't always get anything. So I think it does kind of give a false perception sometimes, but it has done a good job as far as sharing what we do.
Now tell us about your show, the Ghost Bikers Explorations.
So Ghost Biker Explorations comes out every October, every Tuesday night during the month of October at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. A new episode comes out, and we highlight, like I said, the travel, the location, and the investigation. And then on Thursday nights, I follow that up with a live broadcast where I will go in and I'll talk about the tools that I used. I talk about the location, and really it's a live stream, so anything goes. People are able to ask questions, and if I have the location owner with me, sometimes if I do a collaboration, sometimes they're with me. So October is always a full month, and sometimes we even do some live investigations as well at that time. But everything gears up for that. And with season 4 here, we're doing something a little different. We're most of the locations we're investigating are homes, and or at least homes that are rumored to be haunted and have a really cool history. So those are the types that we'll be following there. I really like to highlight the locations that a lot of people haven't really heard of, because people think they have to go to some really big location just to, have an experience. But I'm always telling people that it's like, it's in your backyard, really, if we just stop and listen and pay attention. And I always tell people that it's like, if you close your eyes and touch anywhere on a map, I guarantee you, wherever you touch, you'll find a place that's got some kind of local story or history that you can go and investigate. And so that's what we try to really highlight on the shows that are coming out.
So I have seen personally that Ghost Bike as garage. From there you interview people also. So tell us about that part also.
Yes. So back when the pandemic started, I wanted to find a way to put more content out instead of just putting content out in October. And a lot of people, they just don't always realize how long it takes me to put the episodes together. So I wanted to find a way to put more content out, but then to also find, because we were all confined to our houses and everything, I had a lot of people asking me, what do you listen to? What do you watch? What are some of the different people that you listen to? And so I created it as a way to share some of the people that I'm watching. I have a lot of podcasters on, authors, paranormal investigators, people who own locations. I really like to take people who are doing things, not necessarily the TV celebrities or any of those, but people who are out doing things. And so I wanted to be able to introduce them to the audience that watches my stuff, and really kind of create a network to where people have more things to watch. And it's actually worked out really cool. So every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, I have Shop Talk Live from the Ghost Biker Garage, which is an hour-long live stream where people can ask questions, and I interview people who share what they're doing.
That's good. That's very interesting. So, what advice would you like to give to someone who is a non-believer?
Well, so, I never try to convince anyone. I always tell them, I'm going to go out here, I'm going to get this evidence or get this, get these things that happen and put them together, and I'm going to document it, and then you decide. And so if somebody has an explanation for it and they approach me and they're like, well, Miranda, did you check this? Do you think it could be this? I'm always open for that dialogue. But what I often tell people is, keep an open mind. I'm going to go in and document to the best of my ability and try to be able to account for anything that could potentially be, a normal everyday occurrence. And at that point, once we weed all of that out, put out there what I feel is potentially unexplainable. And, I just tell them, have an open mind and just see what they think,
So is it advisable to bring souvenirs from a ghost riding trip?
I typically do not, just because if I go visit a location and somebody gives me something, that's a totally different situation than just taking. I never take bricks or dirt or anything like that, or any type of artifact from a location, unless, like I said, the owner of that location actually gives it to me. I do take gifts for the spirits. One of the customs here is if you go to visit somebody, you take a bottle of wine or you take flowers or something as a gift for somebody being hospitable in your home. When I go on an investigation, I will always take some kind of gift for the spirits, whether it be something that was a trigger item or food or anything as a token of saying, thank you. I have had different owners. I have had them give me things in return. But as far as just taking them, my philosophy has always been that of the urban explorer, and that is take nothing more than photographs, leave nothing more than footprints.
If somebody wants to go for paranormal adventure, what are the 5 more sites you will recommend?
I would definitely recommend a cemetery. It can be any cemetery. That is a good place to start. I definitely recommend that. If you are here in the States, I recommend the Lizzie Borden House. That is a great one because it does have a great history, and you can spend the night. They have a bed and breakfast set up there. I would recommend the Grand Old Lady Hotel in North Carolina. I would recommend that one as a destination trip. If you have the opportunity to spend the night in that hotel when it's open, do that, but then also do a little paranormal investigating while you're there. And I would probably recommend a hospital, some of the abandoned hospitals. Those are a lot of fun too, because Old South Pitt Hospital is one. And what's interesting about that is you have life coming in and life going out, and it's such an interesting wave of activity. And then probably for my fifth, I would recommend any insane asylum like St. Albans or Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. I would recommend one of those because just they're so large. I would recommend because just seeing the building and the presence and knowing some of the history that took place in these locations, it's really overwhelming and awe-inspiring just being there, whether you investigate or not.
Have you ever thought of opening up a travel agency for people who wants to go for paranormal adventure?
I have actually, and it's interesting you mentioned that. I actually just started a business called History, Highways, and Haunts, LLC, with my best friend who I met here in the paranormal, Dr. Christy Sumner from Soul Sisters Paranormal. We actually started this, and it's just like it says. We cover the history of the location, the highways. That's, since I'm the ghost biker, I like to be able to, I've actually hosted several different haunted motorcycle rides where, for the biker, it's not about the destination, but the ride. And then the haunts, we cover the haunted side. We just acquired a haunted jail, the historic Scott County Jail. And we're going to be running our operations out of there where we have history and haunted tours.
That's great. That's great. So if you could step in my shoes, what you have asked yourself that I haven't?
Oh, wow. Great questions. Let's see. Probably maybe why, why we do this. That's something that I get asked a lot. And, again, for me, it's really just trying to figure out, what this is that these people are experiencing. It's, from all the people, it's over 50% people believe in spirits and ghosts. And, when you start really asking some of the questions and hearing the stories of things people are experiencing, there are some things that can be explained, but a lot of these people are experiencing something. So for me, it's really the why. And, why are they experiencing this? Why and what are they experiencing? And when you really start to look at it, I really want to know if there's a story that they're trying to share, and if I can help to get whatever message that they're trying to share about why they're here and why they still kind of hang around. That's really why I do this.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
I don't think so. That's a tough question because there's so many.
Any one or two instances if you can highlight, which can be added a cherry on the top.
Well, I just hope that you guys will check out the show and share it. And I really love having the conversations with people. A lot of the time people will watch the episodes and then they'll reach out and tell me their story. And that's really, again, to tie things back to the beginning, the storytelling and the history is what I love and am passionate about. And so I've really been able to meet some great people, and just to be someone that they share their story with, of either something they've experienced or a place that is kind of special to them that has a story. That's probably my favorite part. And so I encourage people, if they watch the episodes and they've had an experience, to reach out and tell me their story. And you never know, I may come visit and highlight the location, or at least share their story on my show.
So any message for my audience?
First off, thank you guys for embracing and letting me share my story with you. And I hope you will go and check out Ghost Biker Explorations. If you are interested in the paranormal, I say keep an open mind, and if you want to try it, you don't have to invest in expensive equipment. All you really need to do is, it can be as simple as our cell phone. Just take the audio and some way to video, and just sit down and ask questions, and research into that history, and just ask questions and see if you can get any type of response. If you find that you have an interest in it, then go out and maybe start looking at different types of equipment that works for you. But if you have an interest in it and it's your passion, and there's a way to do that, I say definitely just step out there and do it.
So is there any courses, anything which the audience can undergo to have a more detailed training about it?
It depends. There's not really, I think over in Europe, I think they've got parapsychology courses. There's only 1 or 2 colleges here in the States that actually look at it. Right now, it's looked at as a pseudoscience. So there's not a lot of places to really get any type of training or anything. And you have a lot of different kinds of investigators. For myself and a lot of the investigators that I surround myself with, we have a lot of us, we use the scientific method when looking at stuff. And I would consider myself a skeptical believer. I believe there's things out there, but there are also a lot of things that can be explained. So, there's not a lot of places for that training, but you can kind of look at from another side, really look into the sciences and why things do the way they do. As I'd mentioned earlier, there are things that affect our sleep. People can wake up in the middle of the night and they think that they're having a spiritual attack or encountering a ghost. And a lot of the times that could be because, they're on their phone or on their TV too late. And so they're just not sleeping as well because of the light. So really kind of take a scientific approach, look at the atmospheric things, and then also look at, I guess, always be questioning. Don't think right away, that it's unexplainable and paranormal, because if we really kind of look at how the body reacts to things and the way electronics are and wiring and such, we might find an explanation. So really, if you can't learn as much about the paranormal, try to learn, about the world around, in as far as the sciences and that sort of thing goes.
Lastly, where can our viewers or the listeners can connect you?
So the best place they can find me is on Facebook under Ghost Biker Explorations. I'm the most active there, and that's where I do all of my live streams. I'm trying to really build up my likes on YouTube so that I can also go live on there. But folks can find me on Ghost Biker Explorations YouTube channel. They can find my photography on Instagram under Runaway Vixen, and they can also watch the episodes and connect with me on the Ghost Biker website under www.ghostbikerexplorations.com. And that's where I've got Ghost Biker merchandise, as well as I'm an artist, and so I draw a lot of these locations. And all of that information is on the website as well as all the different videos.
So with that, we have come to the end of the show. It was an absolute honor to have you in my show.
That's all for today. Thank you, viewers, for viewing this show. Do check the show notes if you want to listen to the podcast, which is available on Anchor, Google, and Apple platform. The link is there. Do subscribe us and share with your family members, enemies, and friends.